Vanakkam. Welcome to this course on classics in neuroscience. We have been looking at classic Nobel Prize winning works. In particular, in this series, we have been looking at the classic Nobel Prize winning works of Charles Sherrington. In this class, we will look at Sherrington's Magnum Opus, which is the integrative action of the nervous system. To study this, we will review the paper by Robert Burke, that is Sir Charles Sherrington's The Integrative Action of the Nervous System, a Centenary Appreciation. This paper is available online for free download. I encourage all of you to download this paper and read in its entirety, because with the time constraints, I am only summarizing this paper, which is not really doing justice to either this paper or Sherrington's Magnum Opus work, which is the integrative action of the nervous system. So, here we will attempt to summarize the paper by Robert Burke, throwing some light on Sherrington's integrative action of the nervous system. This book, The Integrative Action of the Nervous System, essentially consists of 10 chapters which corresponded to the Silliman lectures that Charles Sherrington delivered at Yale University, I think in 1904 or something like that, 1904. In this, he discussed reflex coordination, inhibition, central inhibition, spinal shock and recovery, the role of the final common path, the final common pathway, reciprocal inhibition, motor control and reciprocal inhibition, higher brain function and perception. The entire book is written in a poetic style, but still it is quite rigorous. It is considered as one of the major classics of the physiological literature, according to Lord Adrian. So, truly a true classic of the physiological literature is Charles Sherrington's The Integrative Action of the Nervous System. So, these Silliman lectures were delivered in 1904 at Yale under the Silliman Foundation. So, it was funded by the Silliman Foundation. The aim was to illustrate, funnily, God's presence in natural and moral order, whatever that is. Well, essentially it provided a platform for academics to discuss academic work. So, but Sherrington was not just a scientist, but was also a philosopher and a poet. So, Sherrington, being a scientist, philosopher and a poet, used this platform. The Silliman Foundation funded Silliman lectures at Yale to practically redefine the field of neurophysiology, to practically invent the new field of neurophysiology with his Magnum Opus. The lectures that he delivered at Yale were compiled into this landmark monograph. I think he wrote an apologetic preface or foreword in which he said, sorry, I took too long to put these lectures together. So, it took 2 years for him to put these lectures together. The book itself was published only in 1906. In this work, Sherrington practically coined the term synapse as that nexus between neurons that enabled unidirectional conduction, as was first proposed by Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Sherrington also defined a reflex arc, which was the smallest unit reaction in the nervous integration. And there are many properties of reflexes that Sherrington defined, that reflexes could sum, there can be summation of reflexes, reflexes can be facilitated, reflexes are not reversible, there is irreversibility of reflexes and there is a refractory phase in reflexes. several such fine notions. He essentially demonstrated that reflexes are coordinated, that they can change, that they are adaptable, and they can be both excitatory as well as inhibitory. That reflexes can cause an excitation in a receptor neuron or can cause an inhibition, both it can do. And he also established the notion of reciprocal innervation in the reflex circuits, that when one muscle is active, its antagonist or its mechanical opponent essentially relaxes. He provided a detailed experimental evidence to support the notion of spinal reflexes, sensory motor integration and inhibition within the spinal cord. This idea of inhibition within the spinal cord was thoroughly revolutionary for those days, and later on we now know there is both excitation in the spinal cord, inhibition in the spinal cord and disinhibition in the spinal cord that happens at multiple levels. The details of this discussion are beyond the scope of this course, but it suffices to know that Sherrington practically established the notion of excitation and inhibition within the spinal cord in this work. So, before Sherrington's work, the idea of central nervous system or the nervous system as a continuous network, as a wide net, the reticulum, was quite popular. That the nervous system is very similar to the vascular system in that sense, and neuronal cell body are just performing the function of nutritive, or they are just nutritive function. Whereas the neuron doctrine that was proposed by Cahal essentially suggested that the central nervous system acts as has several discrete units. The term was coined by Waldeyer and not Cahal, as neuron, that communicate via special junctions or the nexus between neurons, which Sherrington called as synapses. Essentially provided functional evidence for the neuron doctrine and its supremacy. Suggested that reflexes occur through discrete neuronal pathways, that there are separate pathways through which reflexes can happen, and there was a synaptic delay that suggested that there is a gap between neurons, which is why there is a delay in communication that happens between neurons. Whereas within a neuron, communication is much faster, suggesting that the nature of communication between neurons is different from the nature of communication that happens within a neuron. Although at that time it was not clear what was that nature of communication between neurons. That was chemical neurotransmitters was something that was only confirmed much later. But during Sherrington's days it was not confirmed. But one thing was clear, that there is a gap and that gap is contributing to a delay. And Sherrington practically introduced the notion of the final common pathway, that multiple inputs from reflexive neurons, multiple reflex related inputs converge onto a single motor neuron, which acts as a sort of an integration. And all these inputs essentially together determine the response of this neuron based on the competition that happens between the excitatory reflexes and the inhibitory reflexes, the excitatory inputs and the inhibitory inputs. At a given point in time, when they sum together, how do they sum? With critical importance given to the sign, SIGN sign of the input, that is it inhibitory or is it excitatory? So, this idea led to the discovery of spinal pattern generators or central pattern generators, influencing animal locomotion research in a very big way. Sherrington also discussed reciprocal inhibition, which can be considered one of Sherrington's greatest discoveries, if not the greatest discovery by Sherrington. This is essentially the simultaneous activation or excitation of one muscle and inhibition of its mechanical opponent or the antagonist of the muscle. For example, during tendon tap or the knee jerk reflex, quadriceps muscle will contract while the hamstring muscles simultaneously relax. Today, this is a well known and well accepted concept, and we can study this even using hobby EMG systems and relatively inexpensive systems. But to say this 125 years ago was truly revolutionary. Essentially provided the foundation of motor control and motor coordination. This Magnum Opus by Sherrington completely transformed the whole field of neuroscience and neurophysiology, and it directly influenced motor control research on central pattern generators or spinal pattern generators, locomotor circuits within the animal kingdom, rest of the animals. Is neurophysiology, synapses, neural inhibition, excitation, reciprocal inhibition, artificial intelligence and robotics, computational models, and this work is still widely cited and still widely studied. And there is also one critical thing was Sherrington's differentiation between stimuli that are happening within the body and stimulus that comes from outside the body. The exteroceptive stimuli or the external stimuli, or the internal sensory stimuli, or the proprioceptive stimuli. So, those that are internal to the body, which contribute to a body sense, so to speak, proprioceptive, kinesthetic or body sense. The details of how proprioception works are beyond the scope of this course, but I do recommend checking out my other course on Neuroscience of Human Movement, in which I discuss all these details. So, with this we come to the end of this video. In this video, we looked at Sherrington's Magnum Opus, which is the integrative action of the nervous system, and we very briefly reviewed the paper by Robert Burke, which is Sir Charles Sherrington's The Integrative Action of the Nervous System, a Centenary Appreciation. I request all of you to check this paper online. It is available for free download, and read for your own learning and your own joy. Thank you for your attention.